Today, in a written statement attributed to Iran's new supreme leader and read on air by Iranian state TV, Mojtaba Khamenei called on neighboring countries to shut down U.S. military bases while threatening to continue targeting U.S. interests in the Middle East. Iran has dramatically stepped up attacks on shipping traffic and energy assets in the region, but despite those strikes and despite mounting pressure from the Trump administration, many Gulf nations have been reluctant to join the war. Let's get some perspective now with retired U.S. Army Major General James Spider Marks. General, thanks so much for being with us. What is your reaction first to this statement attributed to the Supreme Leader?
He's trying to separate the United States with what have been legitimate partners over the course of many, many years, as you know, multiple decades. We've routinely maintained very positive relationships in the region, and those have grown over time. So what the new leader in Iran is doing, in spite of the pressure that the United States and Israel continues to provide, he can still lash out. He can provide a little bit of punishment. But for the most part, albeit the images right now of tankers that have burned and those that are burning is significant, there's limited capability that he has to reach out continually as he did over the course of a couple of days. So we're moving into a period, I think, Boris, of transition in terms of the pressure that the United States and Israel will provide. And it really is marching through a more mechanistic approach of targeting. But again, what we're seeing is Iran trying to really create some fissures in that alliance. And that's all about significant economic pressure. I mean, it's certainly contingent upon straightforward moves, but it really is going after economic nodes in addition to just oil tankers.
I wonder how you think the calculus has shifted for some of these Gulf allies and whether those relationships with the United States are at risk of fraying, in part because the foreign minister of Oman put out a statement suggesting that regional actors are betting that aligning with the United States may have the U.S. adjust its calculus, but he suggests that there's growing debate about the effectiveness of those security arrangements. Oman has said that this war is illegal and immoral. I wonder if you think these relationships are actually at risk.
Well, certainly when you hear things like that, first of all, let's keep that in perspective. That's their perspective on the legalities, et cetera. Long-term relationships with the GCC, I think, are going to remain very, very strong. Certainly in the near term, what I would expect to see is kind of a cohesive nature of the alliance. Although I do find it very interesting that the GCC has stepped up and said, we are not going to, at least they've said it for now, we are not going to participate in the potential for escort missions through the Straits. Look, if you go back to 2019, the United States and the GCC collective navies did just that. So the scar tissue is there. The positive results of that are there. I'm curious why that hasn't stepped back up and have been something front and center of trying to further solidify the relationships.
There's also a question of whether these Gulf nations go in the other direction and fully back the war alongside the United States. I think perhaps the most likely candidate to do that is Saudi Arabia. What would it take for Riyadh to fully join the fight, and what would it mean for the war?
Well, I think all of the GCC nations and certainly the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they stand in a better position, certainly if they're together, and their long-term engagement does not include Iran. For the longest time, those regional partners have been isolating Tehran. And now Tehran is giving them every reason to continue along that path. So I think those nations, again, strategically stand in a much better position if they are together with the United States, albeit there is some near-term challenges that exist. There is some pain that exists. But the objective is to further identify those fissure points in the regime and continue to weaken that. Look, the regime is not going anywhere. This is not a friend of the United States or the West. This is not a near-term solution. This is I think continual pressure is what's required, and then you end up with some decisions that have to be made in terms of the Iranian people, whether they're going to stand for this type of illegal, autocratic, brutal hypocritical type of relationship that they have with Tehran? And will they bet on Israel, the United States, and their regional neighbors to be there for them?
Major General Spider Marks, appreciate you sharing your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Boris.
Of course.